Hey there, Taylor out here, and tonight I'm going to be exploring the role of space and time as distinct elements in your magical work. This was prompted by a recent exchange in the Magical Experiments group where one of the members asked, how is it that time and space has little to do with the power and manifestation of results, of magical results? Um, and basically they wanted to know why, or to their perception, it seemed like space and time had very little to do with how magic manifests. Um, I actually disagree with that, and we're going to talk about why. I am going to mention that I have written a couple of books on space-time magic, just a couple, and they may be helpful to you in this regards in exploring this topic. But let's break this down without even getting into the specific applications of space-time itself. Let's break this down into some very easy applications here. And sorry, just checking one other thing, because the last thing I need is, there we go. All right, so first of all, space and time always have a role in your magical work. Consider it this way. You create a sacred space in which to work your magical working. You create that sacred space physically, you create it mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. That right there is the application of space to your magical work. It's you creating a very specific space where you are delineating what belongs in that space and what does not, what the boundaries are and what is not, what does not belong. And in terms of time, well, I mean, the element of time is always present in magical work. If you want to manifest a result right away, that's time. If you want it to result a magical result, or if you want to manifest a magical result 5 days down the line, that's time. I would argue, though, that what trips people up in regards to space-time magic has more to do with the fact that people get caught up in a very linear sense of space and time. And it's not surprising because in general, at least in the West, what we have is a very linear sequential understanding of time. Past, present, future. Past, present, future. And this can be problematic in magical workings because it creates a very stagnant sense of space and time. I would argue that it's certainly important to recognize the linear aspects of space and time, but that what makes space and time distinct and powerful elements in your magical workings is an ability to go into non-linear space and time. When you're actually doing magical work, have you ever noticed or meditation, have you ever noticed where an experience that you've had where it seems like the magic like the working either seemed to take forever and a day, or it just happened really quick, but then when you actually look at the actual time, you're like, wait a minute, there's no way that amount of time passed. That right there, to me, would be an example of nonlinear space and time, and it's something all of us have experienced at one point or another in our lives, whether or not we've practiced magic. I mean, if you've ever gone for a car drive or something like that and you've lost your usual sense of time because you're just in the drive, or you're doing an activity and you get really caught up in the flow, that's an example of that altered state of consciousness. But when we employ space-time magic into our workings for practical magic, what we're really doing is we're looking at how to employ space and time as very distinct elements that allow us to situate our magic in ways in how we want it to manifest. For me, when I look at space, for example, in terms of magic, I look at it as in terms of spatial design, how things are designed, where things go, how they're shaped. I look at it in relationship to um, also figuring out the right space for something to happen in. Some people, they just want to get results, but I would argue knowing what the right space is, where you want that result to show up, is really important. And of course, I'll make the same argument with time, but we'll get to that. It's not always about just getting the result. It's about figuring out the best space for that result to manifest in. A good example for me would be the home that I'm in now. When I was doing magic in December in order to find a new home, one of the things that I ended up doing is, putting a lot of thought into the actual space that we were going for. Just going for any old result would simply not do. Going for any old place that we could find would not do. We had very specific ideas about the place that we wanted to live. We had very specific ideas about the environment, the neighborhood, what the people would be like, um, how it would relate to where we work, all those other factors that are important things to consider. And so when I did my space-time magic working, I really took the time to define the space that I wanted to go into and what that space would look like and how it would feel, and how it would shape the overall flow of my life. That to me right there is an example of incorporating space into magic, because I was thinking ahead and really drawing upon the future space that I was going to inhabit with my family. Um, and actually making it a part of the ritual, working with a future self that already existed in that space and could help my past self, me in the present, really connect with that space and manifest it into reality. Um, so it became one of those things where finding that right space necessarily incorporated space into magic. I think the reason why a lot of people don't understand where space and time fit into magic is we take it for granted. We live in space all the time. We don't really actively think about how we live and navigate space. We're just here. But if you do consider the fact that you have a spatial presence that affects the world around you and is also impacted by the world around you, then you start to recognize the importance of space in your magical workings. It's not something that you necessarily think about because you're just there and you take it for granted. But if you start to plan for it, it can lead to some very interesting possibilities in terms of what you manifest in your life, and also helping you find the right space to be in. Um, Another example would be a space at work that I had, where I basically found the right space at work to manifest my desired manifest the desired level of comfort, and also at the same time, privacy at my work. uh, I work in an open office space, but there's still ways to get some privacy there, and that's basically what I was able to manifest as a result of working with the spatial flow of the place that I'm working at right now. So these are things to all consider in how you approach your magical work. Now let's look at it in terms of time. Again, I find that a lot of people get fixated on getting a result now. That's not always necessarily the best time to have a result manifest. And I know we live in a I want it now culture, and a Veruca Salt culture, like where it's just like, I want it now. It has to happen now. Well, that's great in theory, but sometimes you don't want it to happen now. Sometimes you want it to happen later. I do a fair amount of magical workings where timing is very important, because having the result manifest in the right time in order to set everything up into the right space and manifest the result matters more than getting the result itself. If I get the result too soon or too late, it doesn't really much matter. But if I get the result at the right time and I manage to make it align to my life and increase the quality of my life, then that enhances everything I'm doing. This is one of those things, again, where we don't always necessarily see this talked about in magical work, but it's an important thing. The other aspect I would put to this is that when you work with time, one of the things you discover is that you can do what I call resequencing. You can go and take a nonlinear approach to time, where you kind of step outside the linear sequence of past time, past, present, and future, and where you experience kind of time all at once. And what you do is you end up shifting the necessary elements together to create a different sequence that you put back into place that helps you manifest the result you're looking for. at the right time and in the right space. Again, these are things that I've written about in the books that I've been writing over the years, and it really comes down to the fact that I think that if we understand and explore time and don't just take it for granted, but actually actively make it a part of our magical workings, what we discover is that the timing can lead to some incredible synchronicities that really bring everything into focus and help you manifest the desired results you're looking for. And that's really what I'm trying to do with the time when I look at time as a element of magic. On a different note, it's kind of fascinating to note, to also recognize and understand that, cultures have different notions of time. Like if you go into South America, in culture, South American culture, what you find is that I guess it depends on the culture. I don't want to paint with a broad brush here, but I'm just going to say this, and keep in mind that I'm painting with a broad brush, not intentionally, but based on, okay, this is what I know based off of what I've discovered, but it could be totally wrong. Take it with a grain of salt. But that they have what would be considered a polychronic approach to time, and what that means is that instead of like if I were to go down to a business down there and say, I'll meet you there at 5 o'clock, like in a Western, in North America, Western US culture, you typically have people, okay, I'm going to show up there at 5 o'clock and it's going to be a one-on-one meeting. But in another culture, and it's a monochronic version of time, but in a polychronic approach to time, you can have multiple people meeting at the same time, multiple events happening with that same person, and it's considered the norm. And that's interesting in and of itself because it teaches us that our perception of time can be much more flexible depending on where we're coming from culturally. The benefit of one over the other, it just depends on what you want. But I think the point that I'm really trying to make here is that when you explore time from a bunch of different perspectives, which I've been doing for a long time, gosh, there's a bad pun right there or something. I don't know. But anyway, when you explore time as a discipline or a philosophy or whatever else you want to explore it as, it allows you to recognize that time really is a perception, but it's a powerful perception that we draw upon in order to make sense of our lives. And when you recognize that, then you can start to play with it as an element, because you're no longer trapped in the usual norms around what time is or isn't. And I think that's like the most valuable thing to discover in magical work or in relationship to space and time. I mean, these are two elements that we live with in our lives, but they are a matter of perception, and understanding that can really shape and change your life for the better. Okay, I just wanted to share that, and thank you very much, and have a great evening.